hear you perfect.
All right, cool. So can I. All right, so let's start again.
Hey.
Okay, all right, here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Date and Debate. I am your host, Andrea, and today I am with my really good friend, Tray, who is in DC right now. Hey, Tray, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Good. How are you, Andrea?
I'm good. Sorry if we had a bunch of tech issues. So I apologize in advance if the sound of this episode is not going to be as crisp, but we're going to make it work somehow. So Tray, tell us a little bit about you, where you live, what do you do, who are you, all the good things.
Those are such good DC questions, so I'm going to avoid them. To start. I am a transplant from New England. I moved to DC a little more than 7 years ago. I fell completely in love with the people and the community and the culture here. I spend my spare time volunteering at Children's National Hospital in DC, so I get to hold babies and play Uno for fun, which is something I've been enjoying for a while now. I'm usually at the gym or with my girlfriends. And in leaving your very traditional DC question for last year, I work as a specialist for the Board of Education at one of our nation's largest urban public school districts. And I manage a number of their college and career readiness priorities. And I literally have probably the best supervisor and the best team in the universe. So it's always enjoyable as well, even during the work week.
That's awesome.
Can I just say how excited I am to have this podcast on February 29th, which only exists once every 4 years.
I know. Oh my gosh, that's such a good point.
And anything we mess up, basically doesn't even exist.
Exactly. That's true. That's so, yeah, you're right. Wow, I didn't even think about it. Yeah, it's leap month. Cool. That makes it even more interesting. So maybe that's why things aren't working.
That has to be it.
And Mercury is in retrograde, so
exactly.
That's okay. So I'm just going to jump right in with a few questions. So you've been single now for how long?
Woo! My heart. I've been single with a capital S for
same. Don't worry. I'm with you.
For about 4 months or so now. I was pretty much dating I was in a 7-year relationship and then I was in a 3-year relationship. So I really haven't been chronically single since I was 20.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know about the 3-year one. So maybe I haven't seen you in that long.
Yeah, it's been a minute. We didn't get to hear about or talk about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Oh, that one? Oh boy. Oh boy. We're just gonna jump right into it.
Sure, that's what it's about.
Oh boy, we don't want to talk about that 7-year journey?
Well, I mean, we can go in any order that you want. So if you want to start with the 7 one, because that one I know of, and I do know about that one, and then we can jump into the 3-year one and how one led to the other.
Yes, because that's exactly what happened. So my second I would say I kind of had 3 serious relationships in my lifetime that's probably defined me in significant ways. The first one was sort of my first boyfriend out of high school into college that, kind of my first love. And then I met my second boyfriend who I was dating when I met you, Andrea, and we dated for almost 7 years, which is crazy to think about. I met him when he was 19 and I was 21, #cougar. And we were together until I was about 27 or 28. And I would say that was by far the most significant relationship in my life. I'd probably say that's probably my hallmark of the relationships in my life. I think everybody thought I was going to marry him, but you grow, everybody.
You moved to the area because of him, right?
Yes. So we went to middle school together, which is kind of crazy. And I kind of, I knew where he came from and I knew all his friends. And when we reconnected in college, when he graduated from college and I was going to grad school, he was offered an internship in Istanbul. And so we did the long distance thing for about 11 and a half months. And then when he came back, he got a job in DC and I had just finished up grad school and I didn't want to stay in New York City and I didn't want to go back to Connecticut where we're from. And so I came down here with him and that is what brought me to DC, mostly because I was kind of open to going anywhere and I hadn't seen him for a year because he had been away. And so we kind of moved in and did the whole life thing together. And so, when we had reconnected, originally when we first started dating, we had this borderline codependence stuff going on where we hung out every day and we talked for hours, and even that still never felt like enough, and we were building every memory together, and he was honestly like my best friend. And so when when we moved in together, we were sort of again like playing that house. I realized that the day to day was really, really good. But after a couple years, the foundation kind of started to crack, because I think my biggest learning lesson from being with him was that the person that I was at 21 is very different from the person I am at 27. And the things that I needed from a relationship at 21 was very different than the things that I could tolerate at 27. And it was great that like he gave me all of his attention and all of his time. He always wanted to be with me when we were 21, but at 27, that was really suffocating. And I lived with him, and he would still complain that I didn't have enough time to spend every waking hour or weekend with him. And if I told him I was going out with my girlfriends, he assumed that I was doing something otherwise. And he had like a questionable relationship with alcohol. And so that was a little bit of a red flag. And again, like the day to day was really great. Like he's my best friend. We laughed so much. We had so much fun together. We liked all the same things. But at the end of the day, he didn't really have the ambition that I needed, I think, from someone as an adult. I think he's a really good person. He's a very agreeable person. But at the end of the day, what I realized with him was that you can be a really good person and I can still not be in love with you. And that was really, really hard for me to work through, that like you are very marryable, but like I don't want to marry you, right? And that was really hard, because we, on a day-to-day scale, like we had just so much in common, and on paper, like things were so good. And you're told your whole life these stories about the type of man should be that you want to marry, and he was those things on the day-to-day, but the core value-based, like he didn't have his license till he was 26 years old, and in Connecticut, like that's not okay. And like just like I think things started to break when I had to, in a way, like mother him. And there's a lot of research that talks about like once women have to start like mothering their husbands, they essentially like start to lose that intimacy or that attractiveness to them. And so I'd say like I just kind of grew out of that relationship, and the last straw that sort of broke the camel's back was when I learned that he had kissed one of his coworkers after a happy hour. And even with that, like I still fought for us. Like I paid thousands of dollars in couples therapy, and I fought for that relationship. Yeah, like we went, because I started out going by myself, because I was like, there's something wrong with me. Like I've been with this man for 7 years and I don't want to marry him. Like what is wrong with me? Am I scared of marriage? Do I have commitment issues? Like what's going on? So I went one-on-one, and then the therapist was like, why don't you bring him in and we'll talk about it together. And then in the middle of that is when this had happened. And I had invested so much in this relationship that I wasn't just gonna throw it away. And I knew that at the end of the day, we weren't breaking up because he kissed someone else, right? The infidelity is to a degree a symptom of something else, and that our relationship was already broken, and that's what had led him to do that. And so, I gave my 100% to that relationship, and I have no doubt that I'm in a much better, place as a result of that decision. And I still think he's a great person. And, we broke up, and I think he got married like a year and a half later, and, he seemed really happy and he's doing his thing. But, yeah, I think it just really widened. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Was he thinking about marriage while you guys, even like the last part of your relationship?
Yeah, he was. He would such a am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Such a bitch. He would be like talking about how wanting to marry me, and I would be like, please don't do it. I'm gonna say no. Like I don't like horrible. But like I'm also like, to me, yeah, just like the person I was at 21 was not what I needed at 27. And I think I had grown, and I think that if you don't grow together in a relationship, like things aren't going to work out. And it also made me realize I'd done a lot of work just around like attachment styles and the impact that those have in romantic relationships. And also that, I think
talk about that. What kind of like attachment styles? Share.
Come back to that. Let's come back to that, because it definitely plays into a role with the last relationship I was in.
Okay.
As well. And so we got to definitely talk about attachment styles, because that's my jam. But what I realized with this person that I was with for 7 years is that, at the end of the day, I was dating for his potential, right? When I was 21, I was dreaming about what he could be, what we could be, what our life would be like. And at 27, it wasn't, I was kind of moving in one direction and he was kind of moving in another direction. And it's hard because we had such a strong friendship. And I thought that because we had that friendship, that meant that we were, you know, determined to be something greater. And I couldn't. And with the whole situation with his coworker and just different things, I think it was the right choice. You know, I would rather be, and I told myself, like, I would rather be alone and happy than be miserable and feel suffocated.
For sure. I've always questioned how people can make a marriage work when they marry like their high school sweetheart, even their college sweetheart. Like, you're so young, you know, like you haven't really grown into being a full-on adult. And like you were saying earlier, your needs at 21 were not the same at 27. Like, what was cute once was now suffocating. So I respect people that do and have made it work. I just personally think that you need to grow up before making that big decision. You know what I mean?
And relationships take so much work.
So
much work. And I have so much respect for people who have been like dating their high school sweethearts. And I know people that make it work, and there's a level of comfort. And you know, I think that that's a rarity when you have those people that are able to make it. But I mean, we were not in that circumstance. And that was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. That was rough. That was hard.
I remember when I found out, because I was already here. I was already in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
I found out through one of our mutual friends. And he told me, and I was like, my jaw dropped, because I mean, you telling me all these things, I think that at some point we talked about it, but I don't think we went into so much detail, like really what was going on. And, you know, from the outside, it looked great. Like, you guys were like couple goals, you know what I mean? And
oh dear. Yeah.
I mean, and then when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, if they can't make it work, there's absolutely no hope for me.
And that's the thing is, like, I still, even after we broke up, like, I wanted to be friends with him. Like, he is a good person.
Yeah,
like, like, he's a good person, and he's, you know, he has good values and priorities, and he'd be a great provider, and he, you know, in sickness and in health, like, he would do all of that. But at the end of the day, like, I needed someone who was a little bit more autonomous. I think I needed like sort of like a man, not a man who would like follow my direction and be my supporter, if that makes sense. I needed someone to compliment what I'm doing, and not necessarily you know, just kind of follow in my footsteps. And I think that was a little bit challenging.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it was very, very, very difficult, but props to you. I mean, I know that there are so many people out there that because of that, because they've been with someone for so long, and it's what's comfortable, and it's you know, it's familiar, they end up staying. And I mean, imagine, and they get married and they're not happy, and it's like,
and that was a big part of it was also just like the drinking. And I was just like, if I'm gonna have a family with you, or, and like my family has a really, really big history with addiction, and so like that was a really big deal breaker for me. And so we were kind of talking through that, but then also things like, he was so nice and agreeable. He wouldn't disagree with me. And I was like, I need you to sometimes just tell me like I'm being a crazy bitch. Yeah. Like, can you just like tell me to just stop, or that I'm wrong, or that I should do something another way? And he just like didn't really do that. And it's hard because I, in my opinion, the most successful relationships and the most durable relationships are not the ones that, you know, are with the people that have the most fun together, or hashtag couple goals, or are, you know, have the most things in common. The most durable relationships are what happens when things don't go right? It's how you argue, it's how you fight, it's how you behave when you're stressed. It's all of those things. You know, when stuff gets hard, how does that person react in that circumstance? How do they behave when they're vulnerable? These are all things, to me, it's not about how great things are when they look good. It's how shit looks when it gets bad. And for me, with him, that part wasn't, with him, that stuff was there. But he really wasn't able to sort of be my partner, like my true partner, in the way that I needed him to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we all have like this idea in our head of, or we're like, we grow up with like this fantasy of like, oh, it's all going to be great and marriage is always supposed to be wonderful. But it's like, no, I want raw. I want real. I want to see you struggle and I will struggle with you. You know what I mean? Like, I want people to peel the layers, be vulnerable. And I think that that's what's missing. And I've talked about this before, but it's like this, men are supposed to be like the strong ones, the ones that don't express themselves, and the women are supposed to be like the more submissive ones. And it's so damaging to the idea of what a perfect relationship should look like.
And I appreciated him because he was always vulnerable, and he was able to speak about his feelings and his opinions.
Good.
Which I did appreciate. But I think that once I started to feel resentment for having to drive him around for 6 years in my car because he didn't have a license when I had made more money than him, which wasn't an issue at all. But sometimes I wonder if that was an issue for him. But once I felt like I was writing his cover letters for jobs, or like, helping him.
Mom.
Exactly. It was mothering, and it started to just really wear on him and wear on me. I'm sorry. And it just felt like I didn't have someone who was complimenting me. It was someone I was taking care of, and that was not attractive to me.
Yeah. Well, again, props to you for recognizing that, and just like, I know it's hard to walk away because I know that you loved him and you cared about him. Did you guys stay in touch? You said that you did, right? You stayed in touch a little bit after you guys broke up?
We did. I wondered so he moved out. I literally, the whole move out situation was a little odd because he wouldn't pack up. So I had to pack up for him and move his stuff into the room. And then I had to be like, you're out by October 1st. And then I'd be like, no, you're actually out by October 15th. You need to leave.
Oh my God.
And so I think there was kind of this hope that maybe we would get back together, and we would get brunch once or twice. I think, our mutual friend and he and I went and celebrated his birthday in October. But then we officially probably stopped talking around November. And then by February, he deleted me on Facebook. So, well, it's official. And he posted a picture with his new girlfriend, who is now his wife.
Yeah.
So that was, he wanted to be married, and he went married her a year and a half later. If that's what he wanted, I just want the best for him. And I couldn't be that person for him. I couldn't give him what he wanted. And so, I would have loved to be friends, but I don't think that he could have been friends with me.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because in talking about my most recent partner, he's the complete opposite of anyone.
Let's talk about that, because I had no idea. You kept the DL, girl.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
You kept that on the DL.
I did. Most people didn't know. That was on a DL for a really long time. I've kind of moved. So when my ex and I of 7 years broke up, my DMs blew up when people...
Really?
He posted the picture of him with his new girl. My DM, with both girls, but also with guys, being like, "Oh, you're back on the market," kind of a thing. And so I kind of vouched then to just really keep my personal life kind of separate. And so, when you're going through that process, you don't need people, prompting and probing on your personal life. And so, so that's been on the DL. But after some time of being single, one of my best friends introduced me to a friend of hers. And this is my bachelor number 3. And he was probably everything that my other exes were not, throughout my life, people I've dated, short-term, long-term. And, I think I realized in meeting him that I was, in hindsight, dating the same types of guys my whole life, right? So just kind of, I've been in this cycle of same story, different character, really nice guys who have tons of potential, who are nice and kind and would be there for me at every beck and call and were fun, and I laughed with them, but they weren't really doing anything with themselves. And I kind of organically fell into this caretaker role, and I would get into this cycle where it just sort of perpetuate itself, because I'm a caring person, I'm a supportive person, and we had fun together. And I think that I was attracting people who wanted to be supported because I was a supportive person. And I was finding men who need women to either be that crutch or need women to, and I think it's very the part of the human condition, right? Is a lot of people like seek other people to fix them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this toxic cycle. And so I ended up meeting this man, and he was a man. He's not a boy. He's like a man. And I think I was really attracted to his maturity. He had like his own life. He loves his family. He bought his mom a house at 25 years old before he was getting himself one, which he ended up doing 2 years later. So just like was really financially dependent. He's a great work ethic. He like works his ass off 50 hours a week as a firefighter, and then is also a paramedic that he volunteers as a paramedic for 18 hours a week on top of a 50-hour work week.
My goodness, he's busy.
And he's an amazing TO to his niece. He has his own friends and his hobbies, and I think that was really attractive to me, that I knew that he was someone that like I would never have to take care of. And he was someone who would respect and trust me doing my own thing. And so I think like, unlike my ex, who like every day we had a really good time, but fundamentally some things were broken. This was sort of the opposite in that with this other person, we had kind of the same fundamental core values. And so as much as his independence and his ambition were an asset, it also actually became, I think, a liability. Because he was so strong that he never let anybody in, especially me, right? He was so closed off from being vulnerable, like he was good on his own. He was the protector of all. Affect in a way was like completely empty, and like his emotional intelligence and willingness to be vulnerable was like pretty much non-existent. And I wasn't used to that, right?
You went from like 0 to 60.
Literally, yes. I was used to guys who like could articulate themselves and have some discussion with me. And this guy's wall was really higher than high. And it was probably actually one of the most toxic relationships I've been in, because like he would literally tell me on a regular basis that like I just wasn't a priority to him, like at all. And that anytime I needed him or leaned on him for help, that he proved he 100% wouldn't be there and I couldn't count on me. And like refused to meet my family after 3 years, walked away from me, during one of the most invasive surgeries of my life. And I learned a long time ago that I can't want something for someone more than they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think I realized that with him, right? That he was, even though we shared the same values and principles and we saw life the same, the day-to-day maintenance of that relationship was really hard because he didn't have the communication skills or the willingness to grow that are key to making something work, right?
Yeah.
Which was frustrating because like he had a growth mindset in every other part of his life. Like at his job, he was always doing the most, where he volunteers, in his education, in his hobbies. But when it came to the relationship, he was very fixed. He was like, oh, this is how I am. It's never going to change. It's just like the way that it's going to be. And anytime something that got hard, he ran away. And
you would think that someone in like that kind of position where their job is to help others would be a little more willing to open up. You know what I mean? Like they're so giving.
Yeah. And he and I would talk about this actually pretty frequently. Was I actually almost believed that his job messed him up a little bit, because you have to develop
thick skin, like really, really thick skin.
Yeah, you have to develop a tolerance to be able to see people dead and in their worst circumstances, and to be able to separate your empathy and your feeling. And he was almost like detached, right? And so he would say, I'm sorry, but I don't know if he felt he was sorry. And there were a few times I was like, is this dude a sociopath? Like, does he like I really think sometimes his job sort of messed him up. And I also think that he, the way that he was raised, probably impacted also his ability to like, I'm going to feel something because it's logical, not because it's emotional. And it's very hard, I think, to break that cycle. And I mean, I think he has a lot of work to do. And I think what happened to me when I was in that relationship was I kind of reverted back into this really toxic mindset of like, love is something that has to be earned, right? That if you put up with the crap, it's worth it because the juice is worth the squeeze. And that's messed up, right? And I think there's sort of this, I think there's sort of this phenomena that like when you love someone, you'll do anything for them, right? And then I think there's always these quotes that say like, women marry men thinking that they'll change, and men marry women hoping that we'll stay exactly the same. And I realized after breaking up and like getting back together with him for like 5 times that like you can't change someone by loving them harder, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my worth because he was too blind to see it. And
Yeah.
that was it was a really, it's been like, it's still, there are still times that I'm like in the thick of it. But I turned to podcasts, and I don't know if have you heard of Oprah's Super Soul Conversations? Have you listened to anything?
Absolutely, yes, I do. I love.
Have you listened to the one of her and Tracy Ellis Ross lately?
Oh, I haven't heard that one. No.
Oh my! Can I just tell you, it has been on repeat. Like, I've never listened to a podcast. Like, every morning, it is like, it gets me started. So the most recent one is with Oprah and Tracy Ellis Ross. Because Oprah's doing like this visionary tour, and so she has all these like popular guests. And the whole premise of the episode is on like self-love, especially for like single women who aren't defining their worth or their existence by like marriage or children. And Tracy says to Oprah on the episode, she goes, women spend their whole life waiting to be chosen instead of being the chooser. And she said they talk about like how women are encouraged the whole life to plan for their wedding day, but never for their life. And it just like, that's just been my mood lately, right? Like, can you imagine that if women fantasized as clearly about our lives as we do our wedding day? Like, I'm in my early 30s now, and I've really just kind of been making this shift to like, all right, like, men are disappointing, or maybe my expectations are just been, they've just been too high, even though I still think I only expect the bare minimum. And kind of like, every woman, like, what does between 30 and 50 look like if you don't have
a man?
You don't have a man.
I'm gonna listen to it because that's like a lot of what like I've been talking about lately. It's funny that you mentioned. It's funny that you mentioned the self-love part, and there's a part of me that's like, I've heard it a lot, and I've already talked about this in other podcasts already, but there's a saying, and I heard this in another podcast actually, and it was a psychologist, and she was like, that saying that goes, you can't love anybody until you fully love yourself. That's bullshit. Like, nobody is ever going to fully love themselves 100%. Like, that's not possible. And you're trained to believe that that's the only way that you'll be able to give love, is if you fully love yourself. So you're in like this constant pursuit of the self-love, and how do I get there? And it becomes like personally, there was a point until I heard that, I was like, wait a second, it really is like it's a second job to like try to get there, like, let me love myself 100%. And
Maya's breathing so hard, Andrea. It's so hard. No, I agree. And so just out of curiosity, because I know we haven't talked in a minute, what do people ask you and bother you about like children and a man? Like, am I the only one who, like, I don't know if people have just given up, but like, I feel like I'm getting a lot of pushback about like, just because you can't have kids or you'd be a good mom, that you should have kids. And the older, I mean, honestly, like, the window's kind of closing and I'm kind of over it. And like, I like sleeping as long as I want. I like being able to be selfish. I got up at 5:30 the other day on a Wednesday and took a bath. Right? Like, I can travel and afford it. I can volunteer. I can pour my heart into my work and my friendships and my gym and whatever. I just feel like there's not, and part of the podcast with Oprah and Tracy Ellis Ross are talking just about how you can pour your life into other things that make you happy, right? That like, your whole purpose doesn't have to be raising somebody else. And like, I nannied for 13 years, like, watching and raising other people's children while they went to work and came home to eat dinner with their kid and put them to bed and see them on the weekend, right? And I work in education where I have 80,000 kids that I care about every single day, and the kids at the hospital, right, who I hold and I love. And even when I'm holding those babies and they're so peaceful and so angelic and my heart melts, like, I still don't get baby fever. And people are always telling me like, oh, you'd be the best mom, and it's different when it's your own kid, and oh, you haven't found the right person. And I know I would be an awesome mom, and I know that I could do it. But I just feel like I'm just not at a place where, like, I don't have family here. Who's going to spend $2,000 a month to watch my kid when I'm by myself? Like, I just feel like if I don't find the right person who can give me the relationship and the parenting ship that like I want, then I'm not gonna do it. Like I'm not gonna settle on that.
No, I agree with you 100%. As far as like the baby stuff goes, this actually hit me a couple days ago. I've always wanted kids.
Mhm.
Um and it was the other day I was at a dinner and someone said, you know, women's you know, what was it called? Their biological clock
Yeah.
at 38, it's already it's starting to get late. Like it's, you know, it's
Hey,
dangerous.
I've been here
And
like 20, 30.
and I'm like, I'm 33, which means that I have 5 years potentially to have a kid and have a healthy like, you
You
know,
should be pregnant
hopefully
yesterday. Yes.
a healthy pregnancy. I don't want to be in a relationship and get married that quickly.
Yes, thank
You know,
you.
so it's like, I hope I find someone this year. And if
Yeah.
I do, I would want to be with them at least 2 years and travel and figure our lives out together before we take that leap. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
damn, like I need to find someone tomorrow, basically, so that I can have my baby at 38. And I've also considered, like, okay, well, maybe adoption is an option.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten pressure like on my dad. My dad, for example, like he's more of like, live your life, don't get attached, don't worry about it, you know. My mom, on the other hand, she does want grandchildren. And so the other day we were just talking and she was like, you know, when you freeze your eggs, and I'm like, when I freeze my eggs,
And
like I didn't even think, like, what are you talking about? Like, this was a long time ago. This was probably like, I don't know, a few months ago, and it just like stuck with me. And then she said, like, or when you adopt. It was some comment that was like completely out of left field, but it's like, okay, you already have made that decision in your head that I'm going to be a single mother, or that I'm not going to have kids
mm-hmm.
maybe naturally. Um so it's like those comments that make you think like, holy shit, like I want these things, but I don't want to rush into it.
Yeah.
I'm happy where I'm at. I'm not gonna lie, like I have my moments where I do miss having someone. I've been single for quite a while, like single for like 2-3 years, 2.5 years maybe, and it's hard. But at the same time, I'm like, I see other relationships around me that are just not the most functional,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I don't want to settle just because of my age and because I'm on a time crunch. Like, I'd rather let life take its course. And if kids are not in the cards for me, then I'll just get another cat.
I love that cat, by the way.
He's so cute.
That's awesome. No, I'm totally with you. And I feel bad too. I feel like, you know, let me finish my thought. I feel bad because my poor mother, like my older brother's probably not going to have kids. My little brother's gay. So I kind of feel like I have this obligation to, you know, procreate. But at the same time, like I don't have family or financial resources to sit here and take care of things for me. Like family's so important in raising a child. And if you don't have that with you, my family's 500 miles away.
Yeah.
I think that that's really challenging. And to your point, like I also think there's just not a lot of examples
Mm-hmm.
of women who chose not to have children. And I think there's a lot of people who have kids because they like want someone to take care of them when they're older. But I also know a lot of people who have kids whose kids want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Right. And imagine like pouring your whole heart into raising a child who wants nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my mother was a paraprofessional. She worked in special education her whole life. My whole life, like I have always told myself that I would not have children until I'm okay having a child with a disability and I'm okay with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That I have lived my life to a point that like I'm going to be completely okay with whatever I'm given as a child, like whatever child comes my way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think my backup plan is probably foster care.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, like I don't know if I could do that. Like I just think about, oh
Do
my
you
God,
want to hear my messed up theory?
I would be like a foster fail. Like I would foster fail. Like I would adopt all of them. I couldn't do that. Sawyer, my cat, my friends found him and his brother in their backyard and they fostered them for a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And I fell in love with Sawyer, so I kept him, and they ended up keeping the other one. So they're foster failures for sure. Now they have two cats.
They're your love and you
I
love
know.
them.
He's like right now, he's on my bed next to me, just like giving himself a bath. But he does all the funniest poses. I call them, he's a little yoga cat.
Animals have the best personalities.
They do.
They make me
He's
laugh
so
much.
funny.
That's awesome.
I know. But anyway, back to kids. So I want to talk a little bit about what you were mentioning earlier about the attachment types.
Yeah.
Tell me, what have you learned about that? What are the types? What do we know? And share that knowledge.
Have you already had an expert talk about this while my non-expert self is going to come out here and say something? No. Okay. No. So a lot of people talk about like love languages.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that. Like, for example, the most recent ex that I had, like if he gave love by giving gifts, but I'm like someone who can take care of myself and I don't receive it in that way, there's sort of that disconnection. But I've been focusing more just on like learning more about attachment styles.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at the end of the day, an attachment style or attachment theory is based on the first relationship that a child has and how that relationship influences their mental development. So essentially, when a child is really young, their brain organizes itself to provide sort of this foundational feeling of safety. So like as a child matures, that foundation helps them develop like a healthy self-awareness. They have an eagerness to learn. They have empathy. They are trusting. And so infants who have secure attachments learn to trust other people when they take care of them. They react well to stress. They are willing to try new things independently. They form strong interpersonal relationships. And so that's the kind of within attachment theory, you have a secure attachment, which is sort of what I just was explaining. And then you have insecure attachment. And an insecure attachment sort of has these like two pillars, I guess. And within the insecure attachment, you're going to have either an avoidant or dismissing or an anxious attachment style. So those are the two sort of insecure attachment styles for, a child. And they really learn that when they're young, and then it perpetuates itself usually in romantic relationships, because romantic relationships are the single most similar dynamic relative to like a mothering or a parent figure. And so that's why a lot of the times you will see like regressions in relationships. Like I see this in myself all the time. Like the person I am as an independent single woman, when I get into a relationship, I like melt into this like reverting, like why do I do these things? Like why do I act like that? Why do I say that? Like, and I use this example with my friends pretty frequently, where I'm like, if I'm driving the car and I get a flat tire and I don't have a boyfriend, I'm gonna call AAA and I got no problem and I'm gonna figure it out. But if I have a boyfriend, who's the first person I'm gonna call?
I'm gonna call my boyfriend.
I'm gonna call him, right? Why do I do that? And so, anyways, that's a whole other theory. But within the avoidant, dismissing attachment style, people who develop this sort of attachment style when they're young have like a really dismissive demeanor. They're kind of they learn that like the world isn't safe, and because of that, they're like, I don't need anybody. I'm not going to get involved because I'm just going to be disappointed. Women are going to try and trap you, or men won't commit to a relationship. Why do they demand so much of me? You're too good for me. Like whatever. They protect themselves. They push people away when they're starting to feel vulnerable or like that attachment is happening.
Oh my gosh. You just said like, you're too good for me. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard that from men. I can't do this. You're too good for me. I don't deserve you. You deserve better. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, where is this coming? Like, thank you that you think so highly of me, but
yes,
but it's almost like insulting too. It's like, wait a second, like, let me make that decision. Let me decide like who deserves me and who, like, I don't know. It's so interesting. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, it's very deflective. Like my ex, who I was most recently with, I was saying, who knows? I've like sent him articles about this, about his like, I'm like, I know we're not together, but I just want to let you know about your avoidant attachment style. Like a crazy person. No, he would even like the way he would frame his words. So like if I was to text him right now and be like, it was really good to see you the other day, he wouldn't say like, it was really good to see you too. He would say, I agree. right? And so his response is
Uh-huh.
completely passive. It is subconsciously calculated. So by him saying, I agree, and not saying, I feel this way, he's not having to show any vulnerability of his feelings, right? He's agreeing with what I'm saying. He doesn't have to put his feelings out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So it's like very deflective. And so then the anxious attachment style is usually it's more like the first the 7-year relationship that we were talking about earlier, where that person needs to have like a greater need for intimacy and emotional closeness. And it's kind of this reassurance that your partner loves you, that everything is great between you, that they're there for you no matter what. And so those are the kinds of people that are always can sometimes be like considered needy, or who always kind of need to know like where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, that like you need to constantly show them that like that you love them. And so those are kind of usually like the 3 attachments. And so a lot of the research talks about how you are either secure, anxious, or attached, or sorry, anxious or avoidant. And they talk about how an anxious person is mostly best fit for a secure person, and an avoidant person is usually best fit for a secure person.
I want to know what kind of person I am.
Well, that's why it's crazy.
Like,
so like,
I don't know.
I'm like, I don't know who's secure. I don't know anyone who's secure. So like, everybody's just crazy. But they're talking about how anxious and avoidant are really, really bad together. And it's usually the most
makes sense.
Yeah, it's the most common because they end up in this cycle, right? Like the anxious pulls away, or sorry, the avoidant pulls away, and the anxious follows them. And then the avoidant pulls away a little more, and the anxious wants to get closer, right? And they're just like chasing each other in this cycle. And I think, but what's interesting is that those are also the 2 types of attachment styles that most commonly and most organically find each other, because at the very beginning, when you're playing cat and mouse and there's this chase, right, there's this like, oh, is she going to love me? And then the avoidant or the anxious person pushes. Right, exactly. And so the anxious person is validating the avoidant person, but the avoidant person can't manage that kind of need long term. And so then they pull away, and then the anxious person gets more nervous and wants to get closer. And so there's just like this constant back and forth.
This is so fascinating. I have never heard of this before. Like, is there a test where you can like find out what you are?
Yeah, there's actually books about it. One of them is called Attached. It has a red cover, white cover. I'm like staring at it right now. I don't know the name of the author, but yeah, there's books, there's tests that you can take, there's questionnaires that you can fill out, but it will tell you, and then it will also tell you like about how to improve how you manage your relationship, because it does say that you can't really like change attachment styles because they're learned when you're so young. But again, I am no expert in any of this, but it is fascinating because I think that attachment styles are related to when people talk about love languages.
1000%. And I think that this is actually maybe even more important than the love language.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Love languages are just so like, this is how I feel loved.
Exactly.
But this is more about like character, I think. More about like, not character, more about it's embedded in you because of like whatever, like you were saying, like embedded because you had experiences as a child. It's something that you can't necessarily change. You can learn to work through it, but you can't change. And I feel like the love languages is something that you could adapt and like flex in between the 4, I would think.
Yes, exactly. And yeah. So like if I wouldn't grow up in like a loving household, and like, why is that relative to this idea that I have that like love is something that has to be earned? Probably. Right. And then like, how does that perpetuates itself in relationships? Right. Like, and I think when you're single and you're able to take a step back from things, and you're able to think about like, I do things when I'm single that I do things when I'm in a relationship that I would never do when I'm single. It's because when you get in a romantic relationship, it simulates the type of vulnerability and the type of attachment that you have with your mother or your father, and that is why that's happening.
I'm like, my mind is blown right now.
that so
This is
crazy?
so amazing. It's so, I'm like, I literally want to go buy the book now, and I want to start doing all the tests. Like, it makes so much sense because I cannot tell you how many times I've done things at home, like something as simple as I'll go to the grocery store and I'll be like, I can take these 10 bags on my own, and I will do it. Like, I will do it, and I will force myself to do it, and I do it. And it's just like, if I had a boyfriend, would I do that? Would I like challenge myself to bring up 10? I'd be like, no, I would call someone. Be like, come
Exactly.
help me. It's,
And so there's like this level of validation that you don't need when you're single. But what's really interesting is when like, if I've had to become more cognizant of it, of my habits. And I think that's what, like, when you are in a 7-year relationship, it is very different from being in a 2-3 year relationship. Like, once you hit 4 or 5 years, like, it's different. And the endurance you need is very different. And I think that the relationships that I've been in have made me very cognizant of like who I am in a relationship, and when I need to say sorry, and when I've been wrong, or when like those old habits are perpetuating themselves. Um, and so again, I think just like making sure that you're cognizant of knowing what your attachment style is and why that's happening has been really helpful, because what's interesting is I am also, when I'm getting to know somebody, like if I've gone out on a date, or someone likes me and I don't really like them back, sometimes I'm thinking about those attachment styles. Like, someone who's has an anxious attachment style is very annoying to me, right? Like, it's interesting because like if my ex of 7 years was being annoying and giving me attention and like just like in my space too much, and it was suffocating me, and then I'll look at my most recent boyfriend, I'll be like, why weren't you like that? Like, why don't you love me? Why aren't you giving me all your attention? Why don't you want to make time for me? And then my ex, I'm like, you're giving me too much time. You're too much time.
we're never happy.
Guys think girls are crazy.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to like me needing to know how I behave with a guy who's anxious and how I behave with a guy who's avoidant. And how I behave with a guy who's secure, right? Like, I need someone who's secure, someone who does his own thing and lets me do my own thing, and still loves me the same. And I know that, like, I love them the same, right? Someone who understands that time apart, or just like, if you tell me you're busy, you're genuinely busy. If I tell you I'm busy, I'm genuinely busy. I'll talk to you soon.
Right.
Not these people that are like, oh, you don't love me.
About it. Right. Oh, you don't want to be with me? It's like, no, I'm actually busy. Like, I can't do anything right now.
Exactly. And
so, gosh, this is so.
Yeah, for you. And the hard thing is, like, men don't mature until they're like at least 48 years old, and so
I know.
And so you're dealing with, like, I think women, because we're just like emotional creatures, like us, figuring out all of this stuff before they do. And I feel bad for guys. I think there's a lot of guys our age who are like feeling the pressure of women who like do want to meet them and marry them in 6 months because they want to have a kid, and like I feel bad for them. Like, that's a lot of pressure. I'm not that kind of person, but I do know that they get that. And so I don't know, early 30s is a weird time.
It is a very weird time. You're totally right. But I cannot say this enough. I am fascinated by all the knowledge that you just dumped on us, because I'm literally going to go buy this book and do and find out what my attachment style is. I have a feeling it might be, I think it might be the anxious one, but we'll see. I'll report back.
Yes, I think you have to do some research, because I do think there's like some gender patterns. But I don't know if does your show offer the option for like links and stuff? Because I'm happy to like send you some stuff. Maybe we can.
Yeah. Send me links and I'll add them all to the description. So we can definitely do that. All right, so we have been talking now, I don't even know for how long, because I'm not using the normal recorder that I usually use, so I have no idea how long we've been talking, but seems like about 45 minutes or so. So I just want to wrap it up with any final thoughts that you have, as far as like, I mean, you already shared a ton of stuff, but maybe any major lessons that you've learned throughout your relationships. Like, is there one big lesson that you'd be like, man, I wish I knew this, I don't know, 10 years ago?
The attachment styles are pretty big. I would say just don't date for potential. I think that's something that I always have to remind myself of, is don't get yourself stuck. You want someone to be who they could be, the idea of who they could be, and to also just like know yourself. And I think a lot of the times girls don't like to say sorry or say they were wrong, and so I always try to make sure that people understand that like a true partnership and a true sustainable relationship really does take that true partnership, not one person always being right or one person always having the upper hand. So yeah, I would stick with that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
this was fun. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for, coming on and being patient with all my tech issues this morning or this afternoon. I loved talking to you. I would love to have you back if you ever want to come back and talk about more stuff that you've learned along the way or any crazy dating stories that you want to share. There's definitely room for that.
So many.
Cool. Well, everybody, if you guys enjoyed what you heard, rate, review, subscribe. And so please don't hesitate to give me your feedback. And we'll be back soon with another really cool episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Tray.
Bye. Yay!
That was so cool.
Yay, good.
I cannot tell you how fascinated I am with that attachment stuff. Like, it just makes so much sense.